Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another NEARC community event. My name is Katie Grillo, and I am the GIS Web Technology Specialist at the City of Cambridge. I am also an adjunct professor at Jefferson University in Philadelphia, and I am your current NEARC board president. What is NEARC? For those of you that are new to our organization, we are a nonprofit that is based in the Northeast, so it's New England plus New York. And we host 2 annual conferences every year. We have a 1-day event in the spring and a 3-day event every fall. And these events are designed to bring together GIS professionals, specifically within the ARC GIS community, so Esri software users. And we're super excited. Our fall conference is coming up November 6th through the 9th. We're going to be at Mount Washington Resort in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. That registration for that conference is currently open. It does close on October 10th, or no, sorry. The early bird registration closes on October 10th, but registration will continue to be rolling until we get a bit closer to November. But I highly encourage you, if you're interested in attending that conference, please do get yourself registered with that discounted rate, and please book your hotel room as soon as you can as well. We've got some amazing response already to this conference, so I think it's going to be a big year. We're really excited. So in addition to our conferences, we also host these community events. So the community events are designed to bring folks together to dive deeper into a specific topic or theme. And so today our topic is stakeholder mobilization for climate, health, and equity. I'm joined by H.G. Chissell and Andrew Burnish. And I will, in a moment, I'll pass it over to them to do some more intros. But just high level of what to expect out of today, HG is going to talk to us a bit about his organization called Advanced Energy Group and talk about some of the initiatives that he and his team are working on, some really exciting things. And Andrew has been involved as well, so he's going to demo for us some of the maps that he's been working on. And the goal of today is to learn about what these folks are doing, but also it's an opportunity for you all to get involved. So if you're interested in volunteering to help with these efforts, then HG will also talk about some of the need that they have in terms of how we can integrate mapping into some of the stakeholder efforts, specifically around climate, health, and equity. So this event is being recorded. I will follow up afterwards. I'll send an email to all of you with a link to the recording, as well as a link, as well as some links to different resources. So don't panic if you missed something. You can always come back to the recording or follow up in those links for more details after the fact. So with that, I will pass it over to HG.
Thank you so much, Katie. And thank you to all of you who made time today to be a part of this Zoom call. My name is H.G. Chissell, and back in 2016, I had an opportunity to talk to the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Chicago. And at that time, City of Chicago had made a decision that they were going to be all in on the Paris Climate Accord, although at the federal level, we had made a decision to step away from the Paris Climate Accord. So Mayor Rahm Emanuel and his right hand there, Chris Wheat, put out an important announcement saying that they were all in for the City of Chicago. I got to meet with him later that afternoon and talk to him a little bit about the role of government in terms of driving towards ideal or desired futures. And what he told me, I think, set me on this path of stakeholder mobilization. He said that, city governments, any type of government, can make promises, but they're not the ones who are going to deliver that promise. So whether it's 85% decarbonization by 2040 or whatever the date or metric you want to use that cities and states are making, what was impressive to me was the idea that they're not the ones who are going to actually deliver on those promises. So if they're not going to deliver on the promises, who is, right? And that's really where we have to, in my mind, evaluate what we mean by stakeholder engagement. And is that truly what's going to take us towards the future that we know is so important, the level of systemic change necessary right now? And I think an easy way to kind of get at that question is ask yourself right now, regarding climate, equity, and resilience, how urgent are these issues right now? And if you look at your right hand, you can ask yourself, on 5 being extremely urgent, what would you rate those issues in terms of urgency? Would you give it a 3? Would you give it a 4? Would you give it a 5? Right? Now, on your other hand, ask yourself, how satisfied are you with the level of progress being made to overcome these issues? And give yourself a rate. Take your other hand and say 1 being not at all, 5 being completely satisfied. What I see when I ask this question is most people will give a 4 or 5 on urgency and a 1 or 2 on satisfaction on action and progress. So that gap is where I think we need to take stakeholder engagement to this new approach, which would be more stakeholder mobilization. You can be engaged and be very passive. In fact, that is the default for most stakeholder groups, is that stakeholders are by default passive stakeholders, not active stakeholders. And that became somewhat of a life journey for me in terms of the work I've been doing, is to develop arenas for stakeholders, public and private, to challenge themselves to get things done on short timelines related to climate, health, and equity. So we developed something called the Advanced Energy Group Stakeholder Challenge. It's a 3-part competition. I see Alana Hirschfeld is on from Mass CEC, who participated in this. And this 3-part competition starts off with the speaker challenge. The speakers are invited. They have 8 minutes and 5 slides. The role of the speaker is to present a critical obstacle that requires collaboration to overcome in order to make a real impact on the issue. Now, all of our work is framed around climate, health, and equity. Within that framework, we take the year and break it into 4 quarterly workshops. First quarter, we cover critical infrastructure and resilience. Think about Florida right now. Think about Puerto Rico, Cuba. What do we need to change regarding critical infrastructure to strengthen our resilience as climate consequences become more and more grave? And if you live in the Caribbean, you know that every year you're on a timeline to next hurricane season. So this is not a nice to have if you live in the Caribbean or now even Florida. This is an immediate issue that you're trying to drive progress on. Second quarter, we cover buildings and construction. Third quarter, we cover grid modernization. And fourth quarter, we cover mobility and transportation. So in 8 minutes with 5 slides, each speaker has to finish this sentence at the end of the presentation. Regarding grid modernization, in order for New York City to achieve its carbon and climate goals, carbon, climate, and equity goals, a critical obstacle to overcome in 12 months is, and they have to finish that statement. And the idea is the room of 60 invited, 48 to 60 invited leaders are listening to each one of these obstacle statements, and then they have to vote and determine which obstacle statement is most urgent and most deserving of collaborative action to overcome in 12 months. Once the obstacle statement has been agreed upon by the group, then we break into teams at tables, typically 8 tables of 6 to 8 leaders, purposefully mix between a utility, a regulator, an academic, government leader, etc., all at these different tables. And they have 45 minutes to come up with a 12-month game plan to overcome that obstacle. They have to pick a spokesperson, and they have to pitch that 12-month solution to the audience. And the audience has to listen because they cannot vote for their own table. Once each table has presented their proposed 12-month solution, the room votes to say which table had the best approach in 12 months that they felt was feasible and could have an impact on that obstacle. At this point, part 3 of this 3-part workshop is, once we have agreed upon the 12-month approach and we agree on the critical obstacle, the question is, well, who's going to do something about it? This is what we call the task force challenge. And at that point, I asked participants in the room, would they be willing to join a volunteer task force and hold themselves accountable as a team to deliver this 12-month solution? And this is really where I get to find out if what I'm doing is working. Because at this point, if no one raises their hand, then we all were made spectator stakeholders on these issues. But if people raise their hand and want to get on the field versus being in the high stands, we now have an opportunity to get something done. So I want to share with you that the year isn't over, but we've had 366 leaders volunteer to be on task forces, probably over 17 task forces right now. We operate this quarterly stakeholder challenge in New York City, Boston, Chicago, Washington, DC, and annually in the Caribbean. And this year, I was invited to facilitate this workshop for the American Association of Blacks in Energy annual conference to address the intersection of climate, health, and equity. So the reason I'm excited about this call with you is something happened during these task forces and their 12-month action plans I was not prepared for. The majority of them all came to their own conclusion that maps were going to be essential to being effective in bringing people together and solving these issues and prioritizing properly what should be done first. And so this sparked a big interest for me to reconnect with Esri and reconnect with GIS work. We've been, searching to find GIS experts who could take this data, understand these obstacles, and then help create the visuals and almost the playbook for what to do, but also to make sure that we were actually making progress. Because what I'm excited about with maps is that not only do they point you in the direction you need to go and the best path, they can give you real-time feedback on your progress on achieving those goals. And I think we need both right now to be effective on these issues. And so I've said a lot of words. I hope that was understandable regarding the three-part challenge. Oh, great. I see others on. There's Shelley Cohen. Great. She also leads a task force. But now I'd like you to hear from one of the task forces, one of the members of this task force, and I see Shelley's here as well. This is the task force that came out of Washington, DC, related to clean transportation. And what do we really need to do to remove carbon emissions, reduce harmful pollution, often in communities where these highways just completely go through and drive a lot of medium heavy duty freight through that cause health issues, environmental concerns. This is kind of where we see environmental justice and injustice in action. So this team, and I'll share my screen to set them up for this. This is what it looks like in terms of the back end of one of these events, where we have what we call a resource page made for every stakeholder challenge we do. And so this challenge, I'll show you my screen so you can see what this looks like. All right, let's see. So what you're looking at here is the Q4 2021 Stakeholder Challenge on Mobility and Transportation. This is the summary that comes out of each one of these workshops. You can see on the left, the list of all the ones that have occurred since 2016. Our speakers included for this event, Eric Campbell, who's the State Energy Program Manager for the Department of Energy and Environment. He's working on the Master Transportation Plan for the District of Columbia. Shell Izzy, who is Head of Mobility for NextEra Energy Resources. They are looking at how they develop intermodal EV charging hubs, where you can have a variety of different vehicles that need to be charged, all charging one location. So whether it was freight, whether it was cars, they could all find this one location. And then you had Neka Goka, who is Principal Business Program Manager at Utility of the Future for PEPCO, and Divesh Gupta at BG&E. They all are working on ways to accelerate this approach towards electrification of transportation. They each presented obstacles, but the one that was resonated most was this around how to minimize the permitting and interconnection timeline to launch the new electric vehicle infrastructure we need, especially along high frequency transportation lanes within the Northeast. So to have these charging hubs. So from this was this proposed 12-month solution, which was to gather the data, develop a heat map where you could see where would be the most important places to invest in EV infrastructure charging. And then from there, you could start to develop a project path to project development and qualification of these sites. So this was the group that got together and volunteered to create this task force. You may see names that you recognize on this list. It included the former chair of the DC Public Service Commission, which was fascinating to have her perspective on these issues as part of the task force. And so in addition to those that you see here, we were able to get in touch with Andrew Burnish, who was at the Maryland Department of Transportation, who was able to take this concept and help us put it into a map. And Andrew, I just want to give you a chance to introduce yourself here. And then afterwards, Shelley, I'd love to, if you're still on, get your thoughts on this task force and the relevance of maps. Andrew, if I can hand it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, HG. I appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Andrew Burnish. I work at the Maryland Department of Transportation in the Secretary of Transportation's office here near BWI Airport. And I got involved with the group, as HG said. I'm a GIS planner, which means basically I've got a background in urban planning, but I specialize in GIS work. And I've used Esri products for, I guess, going on over a decade now. And HG reached out to me and said, explained what was going on with the task force, and was interested to see if I could help. And it was a worthwhile cause, and it mixes with a lot of what we do here at MDOT. So I build maps, interactive maps, static maps, and applications. And generally they're for stuff that would go on at a Department of Transportation. So grant proposals, statewide transportation plans, different things like that. Every once in a while, something comes along that is really trying to solve a particular problem. And that's what arose with this opportunity. So I jumped in, and I've been working with the task force, and collaboratively, we've come up with quite a few iterations of the map. Actually, I'm going to demo it in just a little bit and show kind of just a basic overview, and then I'll provide the link to it so you can all explore it on your own time. But we had several different iterations of it and went back and forth and try to determine what data would be most useful to include an interactive map like that. And as HG was mentioning, there's always the end goal of trying to mix climate, health, and equity. So we went for data metrics that would illustrate those. But yeah, I'm happy to show it in just a little bit. As HG mentioned, I've been helping with the task force. Again, I worked here at MDOT. I also teach GIS at both George Washington University and University of Maryland. And I teach urban planning at George Washington University as well as an adjunct professor there. So this is a unique opportunity, but one that I've enjoyed, and happy to show some of what we've done with it.
Thanks, Andrew. So let's see, we just get your screen up to share. And good to know about you being a professor at George Washington.
Yep, I've got to teach a course tonight.
All right, well, I'm going to come audit one of your courses if you don't mind. That's allowed next time I'm in DC.
All right, so can you all see the screen here?
Looks good.
All right, so this is the application when it opens up. And I used Experience Builder for this, which I'm sure many of you know. Experience Builder Esri has not said it straight out. I'd be curious if anybody has more information than me, but it seems to be replacing a lot of what you could do in Web App Builder. It uses a more modernized JavaScript, and so it's a little bit more responsive and quicker and more mobile friendly. It has, over the past 2 years, I'd say, it is provided almost every tool or widget that was previously available in different Web App Builder interfaces now is available in Experience Builder. And I've come to use it for quite a few applications here at the Department of Transportation. And the first iteration of this map I made in Web App Builder. And then since then, when we added different data points and items, I realized that Experience Builder might be a little bit better of a tool to use for this. So when this opens up, as usual, I try not to, with my maps, put a whole bunch of information right away for the user and overwhelm them. So for this, I put what we determined was probably the most relevant or important information. And then from here, the users can go right up here, which I'll demonstrate, and just turn on and turn off different layers. I'm sure you're all familiar with this type of interface. This right here is what's the greater I-295 corridor, which Shelley is on the call. This was something that she had really emphasized or made the case that this should be shown as a major corridor going from Baltimore down through DC and down into Virginia. So we've highlighted that. And then I also went in, something that we use a lot here at MDOT is we're looking at, especially in the real estate office here, which we do have a real estate office here at MDOT, is looking at parcel, so land ownership throughout the state. So what I've done here is I've queried every parcel that is industrial use that is over 10 acres. And we've put those here, and then we've also got BWI. And then finally, since we are looking at, of course, EV infrastructure, we've put the power company areas. So the major power companies, BG&E, Potomac, and Virginia Electric and power companies, their lands here to see who's controlling what or who has electricity, the main electric provider for each area. And then, as I mentioned here, you can just bringing this in and getting to the equity side of things. If we come down here, some of you may be familiar with the EPA's environmental and demographic indicators. So I've included those. They have quite a few. They're very helpful. So we can turn this on if we wanted to look at some of the social equity issues. As you can see here, they've got an overall demographic index, and then they've broken it down into several other different groups that kind of hint at disadvantaged populations. And when you're looking for placement for these corridors and you want to look at disadvantaged areas and how they're being affected, this is another tool or another data set that you might want to look at that would help indicate that. We've also got from the EPA, we've got the environmental indices here. So particulate matter, ozone, all of this type of information is here. And again, as you can see, when it's on here, it takes up quite a bit of, it's kind of overwhelming. So I've turned these off by default, but there's plenty of information here that the task force can look at to see, different metrics that may be of interest to them as they are looking for site placements. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we've got, percent unemployed. We've got other things like just the overall median household income, population density, and then, poverty levels and whatnot. Again, you can turn on and off, as I mentioned, the industrial parcels. And we've also got, for electricity, we have the electric substations, electric power transmission lines. And then there's some items that I've used here in my work at MDOT that we wanted to include. So we've got the National Highway Freight Network. So we just finished here at MDOT an update to the state freight mapping and freight plan, I should say, and I've done the maps for those. So I've brought in some of the routes here that are used for freight planning. So we've got the critical urban freight corridors, rural freight corridors, on top of also the primary highway freight system. So we can see, the different routes here as we go in, and we would look for site placements. And then finally, I also wanted just to show you basic interface stuff, which is a lot of what I would do here for applications. I usually have a vector map when we're looking at the smaller scale, so it's statewide. And then when you zoom in here, we've got the basic Esri world imagery that turns on at a certain scale. And of course, you can change that if you'd like, but this is what I found to be particularly helpful. And then, I like I mentioned, I'm going to send out the link for this. I'll put it in the chat now, so folks can play around with it. And that's kind of what I've done for the task force. And as I receive feedback, I've added more data points and highlighted some data points, and I just tried to make it as useful on several different facets as possible.
That's great, Andrew. Thank you. And I know we have Shelley on. Shelley, if you wouldn't mind coming on camera, that would be great. Shelley Cohen's here. She's she's one of the task force leaders for this group. And Shelley, I thought I'd just ask you, how has the integration with the map affected the work of the task force, and what do you see as the ideal outcome by using GIS maps?
Well, it's really shaped our perspective in a multitude of different ways. The initial intent of what the task force was looking at was creating a larger hub, 10 to 20 acres of land. And as most of you may know, in DC, it's very hard to come by such a large portion or a large amount of land. So when we started, using the map, looking at the different layers, we realized, what we really needed to focus on was how we could reduce climate impacts, pollution impacts to low-income communities. And once we started using the map and some of the different layers, we saw this 295 corridor where trucks delivering goods and services will come down the 295 corridor that stretches from BWI all the way into the city, all the way into Washington, DC, and goes through Ward 7 and 8, which are demographically two of our lower income areas in Washington, DC. So all of the emissions from these trucks that are coming into DC via this pathway are being, disproportionately released and impact these neighborhoods where people live and work and go to school. So what we realized is if we could find a way to have a hub or a charging hub, somewhere along the 295 corridor and get trucks to either change over to electric vehicles or provide that charging capability, we could get more electric vehicles coming into the district, and that would make a huge impact on these neighborhoods and the emissions that are being emitted from the trucks that are coming in to do their deliveries. And very often, a number of these trucks are just using 295 as a pass-through because 295 then leads into Virginia. So we really wanted to think about that traffic pattern and how we can have the greatest impact there. So thanks to Andrew and his work on this heat map, we were able to identify this as a major, a major pollution corridor, but also one that had the greatest potential for, for improvement with electric vehicles coming through. So I think our next task going forward as part of the task force is to try to speak to some policymakers in both DC and Maryland to see if there's some way to even just require that, they call them last mile trucks coming into the district are electric vehicles, and then siting a hub just as they're coming into DC would be the most ideal thing. And Andrew's heat map also showed that there were a number of industrial areas that had plenty of land for something like a charging hub. So it's really helped us focus and identify opportunities that we wouldn't have otherwise known about. So really, really very helpful to have that heat map and help shape the work of the task force.
Thank you, Shelley. I am wondering, for some reason, my video is not allowing me to come on video. I'll keep trying. I even tried with my phone. So I'll work on getting that fixed. It's funny because I was just going to ask if you were there and had an opportunity to come on video, it'd be great to meet you. And now my video doesn't work. But I think it might be helpful if we could take a break and get questions, whether questions on the approach of the map with Andrew, the stakeholder approach to mobilization that I shared at the beginning, and get some questions from you if you're able to come on audio or video.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, HG, this is Andrew. I've been answering a couple of the, as I can, I've been answering a couple of the questions that have come in on the chat board here. One question that I think you and Shelley could probably address a little bit more is the next step, if you will. So I mentioned that this version of the map has been public only since June, actually. But going from here, and Shelley touched on a little bit, but the actual site selection process and how that mixes in with the task force.
Yes. So, and as soon as I can get video, I'll be back on. I'm not sure again why I can't, but so what we learned and what I've found with these task forces is they commit to deliver an impact in 12 months with a certain idea. But as they get into actually working together, having calls every month or so to push things forward, they have to adapt to different circumstances. And through that, they continuously redefine what the next step is and what the ideal objective should be along the way with some general North Star. And so for the next step here, one thing we've learned is that you have private developers who want to find these locations and be ahead of the game as much as possible to try to get this infrastructure jump started. And that would be like NextEra, for instance. And there are other companies looking at finding these locations. I think for us as a group, it would be helpful to find the right platform to share this knowledge so it can lead to the best next step. Is it with, for instance, the counties or this maps have highlighted our priorities? Perhaps there's work that needs to be done at that level to get more understanding. This could lead to RFPs. This could lead to a request for proposals, request for more information. I think another area that would be helpful is a presentation of this to the director of environmental justice or climate justice for the White House, and just give her more understanding of what this is presenting as why this is a priority. So those are my thoughts on immediate next steps. Shelley, if there were any others that you had thought of there.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Our goal and objective as a task force, and you have all of these collective partners and interested related organizations who are working strategically together to come up with some solutions. And really, I mean, to throw it out there, I work for a company that would probably be interested in something like this down the road. But our goal here as a group, as a team, is to find the best solutions. It's in the interest of the public. As a 30-year DC resident, I was very focused on, and with my colleague, Rob Thorne, who's also a DC resident, we were both very concerned that how do we mitigate the climate impacts in this city that we love? And how do we bring forth a solution that has meaning and functionality and can be widely used by anybody? So, this is something that Andrew has been successful in doing. We were so excited to work with him, and I think HG hit the nail on the head. The next level is to have some key stakeholder meetings with organizations like DOEE, with elected local officials, and maybe even the White House, to try to show that we have this tool and the ways that it can be used in helping to cite different projects in our area. So really, really very meaningful there. And, in terms of the task force getting together and collaborating together, that's what the most exciting thing was about it, was that we were all working together on a common solution that would benefit the greater good.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley. And Andrew, if you see opportunities, this is a new world, honestly, for me, cartography and how understanding how much of an impact it makes. If you see opportunities for how we can channel the efforts of this group for concrete outcomes, I welcome your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to field some of these questions here in the chat. As far as prioritizing the layers and the data, a lot of what we've done for this has just been presenting it from my side has been presenting it to the task force at various meetings that we've had and getting feedback. And Shelley's been instrumental in that and discussing with them what types of data would be most useful. For instance, as I pointed out with the I-295 corridor, we have the I-295 area here near DC, but extending that up, showing that all the way from Baltimore and then down stretching on Interstate 95 into Virginia, adding the industrial, so querying on the land parcels and adding the industrial parcels that are over 10 acres in size, bringing in the BWI area for, obviously airport freight, and then, such data as emergency truck parking and data like that. So as far as prioritizing the layers, basically from feedback I get from the task force, and as HG and Shelley mentioned, I hope, and I think the next step will be getting this out to more varied audience, a wider audience. And then hopefully, from obviously presentations like this, just getting some feedback and I appreciate the responses that we've gotten so far. So also from, since this is a Esri or GIS group, I'd be curious to know anybody's experience with Experience Builder. Have you found it limiting? Yeah, I would love to hear that side of this, since this is more of a GIS centered group.
I can speak to that. Hi, this is Pam. I'm actually on the NEARC board and I work for the Vermont Department of Transportation, Agency of Transportation, I should say. And I recently dove into Experience Builder doing for our equity framework plan. So looking at transportation systems around equity and what we need to do through our civil rights reporting and coordinating with the Department of Environmental Conservation for environmental justice reporting that they need to do as well up here in Vermont. And one limitation I've really found with Experience Builder that has been challenging, and Paul, you may be able to answer about this, is just having incorporating a print utility into it that, if you have all your layers drawn and want a certain template to be used to be able to, I know we're trying to get out of the world of PDFs and paper, but get moving aside from paper, a lot of stakeholders do like to have, a PDF that really shows everything. And if you could print out a wall map from that PDF for a group meeting or something like that, sometimes that is really effective. And I've had challenges just getting that to work from the technical end. Andrew, I don't know if you've played with that, but that's been my biggest challenge with Experience Builder to late. But what I did like about it is just being able to build multiple pages of, just different scenarios of all different vulnerable communities within our more metro areas like Burlington. This is Vermont, remember, but that we do have vulnerable communities in Barre, Vermont here, and as well as up in Burlington. So just being able to focus on those areas within Experience Builder and having, like insets in there, if you want to zoom into little areas. I played around with that a lot. And that's what I really liked about Experience Builder, first and foremost, and just being able to draw on menus and things like that. And there's a lot of power behind it. So that's what I liked. But what I would like is to be able to just like export that easily. And that's a challenge.
No, that's great. I actually have made quite a few where I embed like Survey 123. I think the integration with several of the other apps into Experience Builder is helpful. I have come across the PDF I'm glad you brought that up. And my only solution that I've come with is putting a button on there and just linking to, and hosting the PDF elsewhere. So you can just link straight from, the map and have the PDF pop up, and then users can, save it or export or print it or whatnot.
Yeah, that's where I've been using the button, and then just where I'm like being able to visualize it the way I want to has been my, with the legends. And I don't know if you can speak to that, Paul, but I don't want to get too technical with this group, but that's.
No, I appreciate hearing that. No. Because it's relatively new. So I actually don't come across a lot of people who have spent much time with it, but I have found both at MDOT and through several other groups that it's been pretty helpful. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Paul.
and folks, good afternoon. I'm Paul Rooney. I'm the regional manager for Esri here in the Northeast, and it's a pleasure to be on here. And I'm really grateful, Katie, to put this together. Pam, I would defer to, and I'd be happy to defer the question both from you and from Andrew with regard to PDF usage and experience builder to the team. We'd be happy to carry that forward. But I did just want to say that HG, I was really impressed by kind of that realization that maps were an important component to the approach that you're looking to take, and between what you and Shelley and Andrew have shown here this morning, it aligns really in an interesting way with what we at Esri, and particularly in the Northeast, look at with regard to this topic across the folks that we work with. And I think about, like in Massachusetts, Nikki Palavan was on before from Mass EEA and their resilient mass efforts, as well as like Mass Energy Research or Energy Resources is looking at their Leading by Example program across the board usage of their plans for decarbonization. We look at everything from our local government to our county government to our state government customers here as an opportunity to bring GIS capabilities to bear on some of the issues, regardless of the scale that they're looking. So I am fascinated by where this could potentially go, and to where this could potentially go, even with NEARC as an organizing body around one of your stakeholder engagements. And I know that Esri has a team that is very much focused on actually more than just one team focusing on these topics because of how they tend to present themselves within our customers and some of those needs. And I just know that from our perspective in the Northeast, whether it's sea level rise, whether it's some of the equity related issues that you guys are covering here, that this very sweeping topic has touch points that impact a lot of our customers, a lot of our citizens, and a lot of our fellow citizens in a lot of different ways, not just customers. We would be really intrigued about how Esri could be more of a participant in this in the Northeast, let alone what could be done nationally. So without knowing what that might amount to, I'd be happy to stay engaged with you folks on this topic and how it is that you think Esri could be a further partner with this, and whether it's just technically or whether it's from subject matter expertise being brought to bear on some of these issues as they arrive. I was really fascinated by how you have kind of harness the inputs from these different stakeholders into kind of prioritizing initiatives, and knowing that they tend to, if not all, have a spatial focus to them. It's really, I think it's a compelling opportunity and very timely. So I just want to thank you for the work, and
Thank you.
And if there's things that we can do to further it, we'd be happy to participate.
Thank you. Well, you have a tremendous ambassador and leader in Katie, because when she interfaced with our work in Boston, it was just so exciting to know of your existence. I know of Esri. In fact, there's once upon a time, I believe I was a moderator of a panel with Jack. Is his last name Dangermond or
Jack Dangermond? Yeah.
And all I can tell you is, you know the expression, you might not remember what someone says or what they do, but you'll remember how they make you feel.
Mm-hmm.
That was my experience with Jack.
It sounds like Jack.
It really hit me. And this has been a journey, frankly, just that I was passionate about, finding a way to really mobilize as all stakeholders in a critical future, and frustrated by the fact of how difficult it is for us to operate through silos. Yet the consequences coming our way could care less about the things we place so much emphasis on. But they will care. They will affect those that we've really have ignored how vulnerable they are. And so it all becomes so important. And it's so interesting that the work has led me to a passion for maps. I would not have thought this would be where I would end up, but it's clear when you have stakeholders wanting to work together, in a crisis situation, prioritization is critical. And that depends on understanding how information overlaps and where it overlaps so people can get to work. And that's what I'm learning. And, you know, I'll show a couple more examples of how this is demonstrated in Boston, in our work in New York City. But one thing I want to do before I go there, because I do need a little guidance or help on this, is Esri folks are really responding like you are, wanting to support this. And so Carl Nyland has worked to help me get this license that I'll put in the chat so you can see what's been offered to us that I, of course, will have to learn how best to use, but I'm hoping with you on this phone, on this call, you would have some ideas, but they're going to provide, because I am a for-profit, small company, but for-profit company that wouldn't qualify for the nonprofit. But however, they are willing to provide me this. And so as I show you these examples, I welcome your guidance on how to really put this, I feel, in one place so that these stakeholders that convene to get this work done can immediately get to work using this resource.
And HG, before you dive into those examples, I just first off just want to say thank you for you and Andrew and Shelley for your contribution today to this event. It's really exciting to see so many people on and to see so many people engaged. And when HG and I first met, that was kind of the initial feeling, like our call was very energized. And I think I can speak on behalf of all GIS map nerds, especially those on this call. Like, yeah, once you get bit by it, maps are amazing and they're so much fun and they're so visual. So it's fun to hear that someone like you kind of stumbling across it, that you can feel it. It's something that really I think all of us as GIS professionals, we're so passionate about what we do just because there's so much power and potential behind mapping. So first off, yay, we're excited to have another person converted to our side. So thank you. And then also thank you, Paul, for what you said. It's as HG mentioned, like this has been a really exciting response from the folks at Esri. And I think that there is a lot of opportunity here. And a lot of folks in the NEARC community specifically have really expressed a lot of interest in these topics and in wanting to make impact and have meaningful contributions towards something, but we don't always know where to go. And that's where I feel like this is an interesting and exciting opportunity where HG, you're kind of providing us with some guidance and a platform to be able to use our skills to make an impact. So it's just exciting, and thank you. And yeah, please, if you want to show some more examples, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And in many ways, I'm just excited to amplify your impact you're already making, which now I appreciate more through this process. It's been exciting. So what I'd like to show you is the outcomes from our stakeholder challenge we did for the American Association for Blacks in Energy National Conference. And the stakeholder topic was the intersection of climate, health, and equity. And so I'm going to share my screen and show you the outputs and show you who were the speakers and then what came from it. So I had been approached by Novartis earlier this year by an amazing gentleman named Jim Gaudreau, who was over there head of climate. And Novartis was really looking at ways to get into a place of support and action for Black physicians to support their understanding of these intersection of climate, health, and equity, and support their ability to communicate as leaders into the communities most vulnerable, the importance of action, of working together to make real progress and demand progress on these issues, and validate why funding needs to go certain places first. Because I think one thing you might agree with me on is COVID was a great experience of understanding that we all are essential, which isn't easy to understand or appreciate in a world of a lot of convenience. But during COVID, we really understood that everyone is essential for our overall well-being. And I think when we look at where we are now with the funding that's put on the table for the Inflation Reduction Act, billions of dollars, and a stipulation that 40% of benefits get into environmental justice communities because they are most vulnerable. We as stakeholders need to be able to convey consensus on priorities. And that's where I see the maps also playing a real exciting role to galvanize people for action. So this group included Shalonda Baker, who now is Senate approved, a Senate appointed Director of Climate Justice at the White House, and Yves Novell from New York Power Authority, and then Dr. Shanita Johnson from Morehouse School of Medicine. She is the senior fellow at the Global Health Equity Climate Change Group, and she also works with the National Medical Association. It was ultimately her obstacle statement that was chosen from this room of professionals. And mind you, this is the convening of senior level leaders related to energy across the country who are African Americans coming together. And of all the obstacles presented, this is the one that resonated most with the audience of about 75 or 80 leaders. And it really goes to this point about maps. You know, the health community is not understanding the language of climate change in a way that they can get behind it and validate why we need to move quickly. When we think about COVID-19, it's Dr. Fauci who's on the screen, giving us that sense of, you know, understanding how important this is, and it being, for the most part, trusted by the majority of the population to move to action. She feels that health professionals are not well positioned with information to communicate that message on these issues to galvanize action. And so she agreed to lead this task force to accelerate this understanding and ability for physicians to communicate these issues. And the first milestone on their 12-month solution pathway was a GIS partnering to get GIS maps consolidated to tell this story that could help them communicate it better. And so what has happened with this group, which is very exciting to me, is the task force has gathered attention from leaders across the industry to be a part of it. And from this original group that you see here on the screen that got engaged, from PJM to multiple utilities, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, this task force started working together. And the chief medical officer of Esri got engaged and started finding time in her schedule to join these calls and add links to information so that it would help this group work towards pulling together this story map to tell the story specifically in Atlanta, Boston were the two that they were chose to work on first. And so they've been working on these issues, and also New York City. And so just want to show you what was put together as the data sets that then need to be put together into a map that demonstrates priority. I'll just take a pause there and see if there are any questions, if anybody wants to come on and ask me about this task force. Okay.
So HG, just a quick question. So you formed the initial task force, and then how did you integrate with the mapping professionals? So is it mostly like word of mouth of individuals that are already on the task force, or do you have some sort of like page that people can check in on for when there's opportunities? Like, how do we get engaged?
So I'm going to send you a set of links, and if you're interested in any of these, just send me an email and I can get you connected with the task force. Often what's worked great is that you come on as just a guest speaker and share about your perspective on how this information could be put together in a way most effective using GIS maps. That would be extremely helpful. For this one, we've had a great group join and participate. It would be just good to have a cartographer come on and learn to understand better where everybody is with this task force and its progress forward. I did something in New York City where I knew the executive director over there, Sarah Johnson in New York City Department of Health. We'd worked on some air pollution issues at the Hunts Point market. And I told her about this initiative by this group. And that sparked her to ask me to put together a roundtable on health for New York City, which we did during Climate Week. And let's see, one of these is that example. Novartis helps support the work. And this is the lineup that we had, kind of a follow-on to the event that happened in May at the ABE conference. And Sarah Johnson, so she's the executive director of air quality for New York City Health. She presented, and what was interesting, each one of these epidemiologists presented using maps. And what I learned from them is that they said, yeah, but we already know what the maps say. The maps say this, this, and this. Our problem is the information the map conveys is not interfacing with the people we most need to work with to make a difference. And so while the map is a tremendous resource, not used as a tool for stakeholder mobilization, it doesn't have the value that it could. And so they asked me to bring into a room with them leaders from the utility Con Edison. Oh, great question on broadband. Yes, on the digital divide in Chicago and in Boston, actually, too, with Verizon. So they asked me to assemble a room of leaders where they could help align on these issues using maps. So if you look at this, and you all will have links to these pages, so if you want to dig into these material, you're welcome to. So Sarah presented this map. And the thing she wanted to convey with this map is that sometimes where the air is the worst, it's not where it's most harmful to vulnerable populations. That red dot in the middle, for any of you who are connected with New York, just think Port Authority. Sorry, the bus terminal right there on 42nd Street and 8th, between 8th and 9th. That's the epicenter of pollution coming in, fine particulate matter, into New York City. But no one's spending the night there, right? If you look at the areas with the ones, the greatest risk, causing the greatest damage, it's in the South Bronx. This is another high transportation corridor, but this corridor, the people living there don't have the luxury of going down here to sleep. And so the city is trying to convey the importance of this to drive policy that gets at these issues or drives projects, because the money now is on the table. The money is here to do these things and the promises have been made. It's the direction of where this money goes and the validation that it should go here versus there. That's where we're at right now, I feel, in this made. It's laws have been passed, money's on the table, but where do we really go to make the best, deliver the best benefit? And how do you validate that there was the best place to actually have done that benefit? That's through intersectional stakeholders aligning with maps is part of the solution, I feel. So out of this discussion, by presenting this, we went to the breakout challenge. And so at the tables, they worked on what would be the proposed solution was a South Bronx Electric Truck Center of Excellence. So using the South Bronx as a place to put in a model place for electrified medium and heavy duty trucking with the right EV infrastructure to support those electric trucks in the South Bronx, as well as a training opportunity for job creation there as well. There's all this and people to get involved. So focusing on doing that over the next 12 months, every time a group does this, they have to give 3 quarterly milestones. So milestone 1, this group said they would engage public and private stakeholders. They're going to use a map to validate the urgency and why this is most important here. And then they're going to submit application. It looks like 2 stakeholders for ideas on what we could do in this location. And then finally, they're going to develop some type of a pitch on this issue. One of the people in the room was a woman from the mayor's office. And she said, if you could do this and bring this back to me, it would put me in such a good position to prioritize this as an issue. and have the utility behind us, the regulator of the utility behind us, the major entity that gives grants in the cities behind us, we would all know this was the right place to start first. So that's a group that's going. You can see who's on the task force if you're interested. And again, this would be on the link, so you can just go and look at this at your leisure. I thought that was a really good one happening in New York City. That's an outcome of this. Priya, I see your question there about broadband. In Boston, the most recent task force stakeholder challenge we did was on grid modernization, and Verizon hosted the event at their new innovation tower right next to the garden in Boston. And what the woman there, and I'll just go to that one so you can see it. The speaker from Eversource, Brandy, talked about Eversource's challenges on getting low-income, vulnerable populations, communities, hard-to-reach communities, trusting the utility to accept what they were providing to improve the energy efficiency in their homes. And one of the components to improving the energy efficiency in these homes is smart thermostats. So the smart thermostat, not just, in order for it to be smart, it needs to be connected. So that creates this interesting partnership opportunity with, on the telecommunication side, with the energy utility. If these communities do not install these smart thermostats and have ability to regulate their usage during peak times as we electrify everything, the energy cost burden on these populations is going to become much worse than it is right now. And so it's a tremendous issue. In fact, right now, Eversource is concerned with the fact that they have to request a up to 60% increase in prices, electric bill prices for gas, gas bill prices for this winter due to the war in Ukraine. So these things are really powerful and are coming together, and we're learning things that where there needs to be immediate action. So if there was a way, for instance, to layer on areas where there is not access, where we know we're not getting access, with areas that we know are going to face the highest energy cost burden, that could justify why a prioritization of that approach would be more important than others. And again, the idea is we think that can be really effective using the maps. Any other questions? This is the one, sorry, I was going to go and show you this one. This is the one on so enabling these flexible load management among hard to reach populations. Those are the smart thermostats that require connectivity to be able to work. Hi, Paul.
Hey, H.E., I just wanted to throw something out there to you again. I'm glad that you'd already connected with Carl, and I wanted to just point out that some of the technology that he has enabled for you aligns really well with the kind of community engagement model that I think you're talking about here. And and we've had some discussions and are taking some steps, frankly, with the NEARC community to leverage what's the hub technology that you had alluded to before, as a way of being able to build initiatives that are targeted around particular topics and convey that information to the public with a range of tools associated with actions. So it feels like it's almost it's not exactly a ground zero discussion point right now, but the encouraging thing from my standpoint is the community of users here on this call, the interested participants in this call, have access to very similar types of technologies. And what Esri's been able to do over time with the growth of these tools is to create those connection points, so that as the work that you are doing aligns with what maybe were the interest level in the Northeast, the NEARC community may be a way of connecting through and sharing your information a similar environment that they're already hosting on behalf of their user communities. And you've got folks from the university community here. You've got folks from the public sector certainly here on these calls. And the capabilities now are for it's much easier for people to make connections so that the work of an organization like yours is able to be incorporate into what they're showing to their local constituencies. So a lot of what we do and a lot of why we do it is to direct the authoritative work of our customers to share knowledge about issues of importance in their community with those communities as a whole. So I just think it's exciting to hear this conversation and to I'm interested to know kind of what it is that Esri can be doing further with you and with the other folks on this call as moving forward. I'm just excited about the idea that it can tap already existing technologies in those sorts of ways. So
yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
And what I love too is when these volunteer stakeholders who are supported by these organizations get involved, most often they have an Esri account.
Yeah.
So, New York City Health certainly does, the mayor's office, the utility. It's just because they're all committed that this is an important issue to address and they can all leverage that shared resource is, I think, will be really effective for all of them to be successful.
And I apologize because I'm going to have to drop shortly, but I will reach out to you directly and would love to kind of stay in touch with you. And Katie, again, thank you for setting this up and would love to have further conversations or participate in further conversations with NEARC as a forum here and see how it could be that the members would like to pursue something further like this. So thank you again. It's a pleasure.
You, Paul.
Really,
and
really
you guys will
interesting
get
work.
invites to our work in the Boston.
Thank you.
So thank
you.
Yeah.
Great. Good to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just put on the screen here so you can see these are the organizations that sponsor our work, either as a partner or as a financially supporting sponsor. It's a good range. The point here is that this is not in the interest of one organization or sector. This is for all of us, and we all need to learn how to work together as cross-sector teams. So I guess one thing I'd like to ask a question of you all is, the understanding around how to prioritize where to act together as teams makes sense for me with the maps, and I see the potential there. The other thing that I'm wondering about, and oftentimes most motivates me to keep doing this work, is when I think about the NFL, which is not what I would have expected to say because I'm not a big football fan, but the one thing that the NFL does that I haven't seen anyone do better is stakeholder mobilization. They get 70% of the United States population considers themselves a football fan. The amount of revenue year over year that the NFL makes and is projected to make well into the darkest, challenging moments of this developing crisis is just year over year growth. Now, the only year the NFL has not had year over year growth in the billions was 2020 during COVID. But right back after it, they're on track to be at 27 billion. And I bring this up because as someone trying to mobilize people to work together and play as really a professional team, a high performance, high accountable professional team together, I look for where I can get ideas. And having a scorecard, being able to demonstrate progress helps people feel that they're playing to win at what matters most. And because I don't think that's there, that gets co-opted for things like the NFL. I mean, we're really into football. At the times, we have these other really important issues to solve. So I think if we could take some of that into this work, it'll be very significant. And so one area I'm wondering with maps is, what are examples of using maps to demonstrate progress? How do you do that? How could you make that feel like a scoreboard for invested cross-sector communities to get something done important like this? How would you do that? I see you, Marcia. I don't know if you're gonna help me with an answer here.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute here. So one of the things that, I mean, I haven't worked in this particular sector, but I find it very interesting because in my work, I've used maps for, I have integrated maps into decision-making processes like what you're doing. I have also used maps for integrating local knowledge, perceptions, even stories, and I've worked a lot with fishermen. So in that sector more than anything, but one of the things that we've used maps to show progress is basically integrating, for example, new policies that have been implemented in certain places, changes that have been implemented, shown in maps. But I think ultimately one of the things that we have maybe not show progress on maps, but maybe show progress on how integrating the participation of people is by, building capacity in these communities on how to use technology, maps for them to keep monitoring or just generating data or things like that. So I mean, I don't know if I'm actually answering, but probably, that could be an exercise to do with other scholars, other stakeholders on how they would like to see progress represented in maps.
Mm-hmm.
One example, AG, I mean, I can think of is a lot of work that we do in GIS is change detection. So, over time, how something has changed in the landscape. So you show that as a comparison on a map. Okay, 20 years ago, this was the demographic, for example, and now 20 years later, this is what we see. And, it could be based on a policy, like it's some policy that's been implemented that's caused that change. And you can see that in the population, you can see that in the landscape. So all of that can be shown on a map really easy. And then if it's a successful policy, that's progress. So then you can show that on a map. So that's a tool that we use in GIS all the time.
Oh, that's good to know, because I think that's so important. If we can't feel that we're making an impact,
mm-hmm.
then we'll go back to watching football. Yeah. So thank you. This is great to know. And I think about this. We do work in Puerto Rico. And so in Puerto Rico, one of the critical metrics was number of days to restored power after a level 5 hurricane. And you want to correlate that to fatalities over time. So you can see that the longer it takes for communities to have power for not just lights, of course, but for medicine and everything, the more fatalities you have. And so being able to have maps in place that show that now, but what does it look like after we just went through Fiona? What was the improvement in time? And just trying to find ways to I think that's going to help get more people mobilized to be working on this. So thank you for that.
Yeah, the biggest challenge, of course, is data, because there are so many privacy issues involved, especially, in our country. I think we're very cautious about that. So that's always the biggest challenge, is getting good data and up-to-date data. So
yeah, that's a good point.
But for that, sometimes, I mean, and I don't know in this particular case if that applies, but for data generation, sometimes crowdsource approaches might work in some cases. Obviously, there's a lot of issues that come with these kind of approaches. But when I was talking about like just using GIS or using maps for generating data through capacity building, once the community sort of integrates that into their daily lives, it's possible to reach to that point. I think it's like a long-term kind of
Yeah,
approach,
yeah,
but
I can see that.
mhm.
But it's amazing how many maps aren't layered, aren't put in one place that should be together. That's been interesting for me to see. And I think right now a lot of the work where we could use help, if the offering from Esri would provide this, are almost opportunities for New York City Health to say, oh, well, let me layer that on, that data that you have on this. And then they could say, well, sure, just go to our site and we could add that as a layer. Just start to having the maps organized for the issues more would be great. So I put in the chat my LinkedIn profile, and the other thing I would encourage you to do, I think this will work, is just you can follow Advanced Energy Group on LinkedIn. We put all our outcomes, and if there's an event that you want to go to that you feel would be of interest to you, just let me know. For being on this call, you'll come as my guest. You'll tell me what you think, and hopefully we can talk more in the future. Here's the Advanced Energy Group. Thank you for your questions and interest. Andrew, thank you for all that you've done to help us get where we are and being willing to share the technical side of this.
No, of course. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, HG.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. Katie, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, my computer seemed to have crashed. So hopefully, I'm on my phone now. So hopefully the recording is at least going to be maintained. But I apologize for that. But yes, I just wanted to say thank you, HG, for collaborating with me to help create this event. Thank you so much, Andrew, Shelley, and for telling your side of the story and your experience. It's really exciting to see an example. I think that makes it so much more relatable for all of us that are thinking about potentially getting involved, right? And then thank you to everybody else that just joined the call and spoke up and engaged. I think we've done a lot of these community events so far, and this by far, I think, has been one of the most engaging. So thank you all for just speaking up and asking your questions and being involved. It's really exciting. And I just want to say, so moving forward, we do have more community events coming up. The next one is a meet and greet for the NEARC board, where we actually have 2 board vacancies that are coming up at our fall conference this year. So if you're interested in getting more involved with NEARC, then this is a great opportunity for you to join the board and help with some of these initiatives, like what we're doing with community events, or helped with conference planning, that kind of thing. So I'm going to defer to Pam, please, if she's still here, to put a link in the chat to our community events. And yes, please join us for that open house. And Pam, do you have the date in front of you? I think it's November. I can't remember. I'm so sorry. I think it's November 4th.
Hold on, you're gonna give me a minute to get our page back.
As I said earlier, I will send a follow-up email with some resources from this event, and that'll include a link to our upcoming community events. It'll also include a link to our fall conference, which is November 6th through the 9th. And as I said, the early bird deadline to register for that conference is ending on October 10th. So if you're interested in joining us, which hopefully you are, then please do register as soon as you can and get your hotel room booked. We're really, really excited for that event. And who knows, maybe HG, you can come join us there as well. or Andrew or anybody else if you want to make the trip. We are based in the Northeast, but we're open to anybody. So thank you all again so much, and looking forward to seeing where this continues to evolve towards. So thank you.
Thanks, Kitty.
Everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.